Welcome, everyone. This is Lyman Goodrich, your producer at IT Unity. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's episode of CollabTalk. We've got SharePoint Goes Mobile, document libraries, groups, updates, and much, much more. So since we're jam-packed in our limited hour, without any further ado, please welcome your CollabTalk panelists, Naomi Moneypenny, Marc Anderson, and Christian Buckley.
Hello. That works.
Hello, everyone.
That's all good. Thank you so much, Lyman. Appreciate that. So we're excited to be here again. And just quick introductions, because as Lyman mentioned, we have so much to go through at our CollabTalk show. My name is Naomi Moneypenny. I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Many Worlds and an Office 365, or whatever we call ourselves these days, MVP. And Christian, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thanks, Naomi. And my name is Christian Buckley. I am the Chief Marketing Officer for BZ. I'm a 5-time MVP of whatever it's called today, SharePoint, Office 365, et al. I'm just based here now in the Salt Lake City area. Just made the move in the last week and a half. And Marc, over to you.
Hi there. I'm Marc Anderson. I'm based around Boston-ish, sort of. And I'm a SharePoint guy. And that's sort of what I do. But I do it in the cloud, I do it on the ground, I do it on premises. Any place there's a SharePoint, I'll go and play with it.
Such rich information there. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
There. Too bad.
Nobody wants to hear about me.
Well, a sponsor today, unofficial sponsor, Poopery. All right, sorry.
All right, so I want to move to our first topic, if we may, and talk a little bit about the new SharePoint mobile experience. So, and all kinds of cool stuff there. And so hopefully you can see my screen right now, and I just wanted to show some screenshots of really what's going on. So I have to say I am incredibly impressed with this app. It's been really awesome. I wish I could show it to you live on my phone, but I need a little connector, which I don't have. But at least you can check out the Office blogs. And if you actually want to see a whole video of it, there is a great mechanics video that actually goes through and shows you that stuff in depth. So, there's some great ways of being able to see all of the different content, the sites, and being able to identify that really quickly as part of your everyday experience. And then the people tab also, which I think is really, really important. It really helps you to see what other people are working on. So it's not just looking up basically the results of your people search, but it's also just helping to surface up through the Office graph the stuff that they're working on, things that they're actually looking at, and that kind of stuff. So that's just really powerful. And then search, yay! Search is fantastic. I just love this through here. It just makes it so much more easy to consume some of the SharePoint content that's out there. It really makes it an easy experience for me. So I don't know, I'm kind of a lazy user sometimes. I have to admit, when it comes to putting my content out there. My default approach is often just to dump it into the shared with everyone folder on OneDrive for Business. But I actually found that using the SharePoint mobile app has actually increased my use of SharePoint because it's made it a lot more approachable, a lot easier to use. So, guys, I know you have some thoughts about this. Marc, perhaps you want to talk about it first?
Well, you're always so enthusiastic. I love it. I mean, that's why we like to hang around with you. It's interesting. I think the app is amazing. I mean, I really do think they have done a great job. The things that I've found that some people are struggling with is, how do I move around in it? How do I sort of make sense of, my idea of SharePoint, which is a bigger, wider thing than what you get to see on that phone app. So, just sort of getting to understand how the navigation works and why it looks different or how it looks different, so they get used to it. I haven't had any clients or people I know actually using it. It sounds like you've been using it pretty heavily. We've all sort of seen it, and I just don't know a lot of people who have been using it as a workhorse kind of application yet, but it's nice, and I've seen they're rolling out improvements on a regular basis, which is the new Microsoft model, and it's great to see them reacting to feedback, making sure that things keep improving. The one thing that I love about all these demos is they're always beautiful, right? Because everybody's document has a lot of pictures in them, right?
Yeah, I might.
The problem with Delve or this app or anything else is that, you know, most documents tend to be sort of text-based and it doesn't look all that great. But it still looks decent on the phone for sure.
You know, one of the things that is, and this isn't a you know, kind of a hit on the app, because I do think it's really well done. And so if you are following along with the changes that are happening in Office 365, and then the mobile app is right there consistent with that experience of what's being developed for the browser. But as this is kind of a reminder, maybe Mark, this kind of goes to your point, is maybe people aren't using it because one of the things that I find for myself is that I go in and I look at my app for our internal system. We're not a massive organization, but I'm realizing most of my content that I work with day to day is not in the places that are being found by the app.
Right.
And I think that's just a certain reality for a lot of people that have, since we've not had the app, you know, for the last few years, we've gone and we've developed the way that our daily practices around the tools that work for us. And that could be striped across multiple locations in SharePoint, as well as like Dropbox and our desktops and, you know, kind of all those other, you know, file shares and other systems. And so now we need to train ourselves to put it in the places that this will pull up. So I think it'll adjust over time as people go and experiment, because it is a really rich experience.
One thing I'm really starting to wonder about is, you know, as SharePoint itself becomes more responsive and actually sizes very well if you're just in a regular browser on some of the modern experiences, you know, it'll shrink in size quite nicely without any app at all. So it's almost like the app came out so late in the game here that people may not have a high uptake on it because SharePoint itself is going to become so mobile-ish at the same time. So I have had quite a few people ask me questions about that. Well, why would I use the app if the new SharePoint framework is going to give me fully responsive pages, for example? And that's a good question. I mean, I think we'll see that people will vote with their thumbs, I guess, and we'll find out where people tend to gravitate.
No, I think it's a great point. I do think one of the interesting things is I love the app the way it is. It is actually increasing my usage of SharePoint, which is always a good thing. And though one of the aspects of it is there's also a lot of updates of the OneDrive for Business app. So I don't know if you guys have been using that too. So they're pushing updates there, and now you can see sort of content in both places, which is getting better and better. But I do feel there is that opportunity, and obviously it's going to come, right? Because we have a mobile app for Office 365 groups. We have a mobile app for Delve, the Office Graph Experience. We have also one for OneDrive for Business, and now we have one for SharePoint. And I love the SharePoint one for even simple things like remembering my logins and all that kind of stuff too. So that, I think just one example of how it's easier maybe from a web experience. But when all of those things come together and we have that kind of personalized intranet, I do think it's going to be a very powerful experience. So it's right now I do feel we're delivering point solutions, on your app. So you do have like a lot of apps on your phone. Like half of my phone seems to be Microsoft these days, just like Office and just getting work done stuff. But I think there's a great opportunity to bring all those things.
Have you guys noticed that there's a lot of, you'll open something in the SharePoint app, it'll take you to OneDrive, which will then take you to Word, which will then maybe hop you back over to OneDrive. It can be a bit disjointed. I mean, you sort of, if you pay attention, you can sort of figure out where you just traversed.
Right.
But hopefully that experience gets a little bit less sort of jumpy. It feels a little strange when you end up taking those 3-4 hops to look at a simple document.
Well, I like a lot of the emphasis on the recency factor, because oftentimes that's what you need the most, right? From a SharePoint thing, you just really want to see, okay, here's the stuff. I know I was working on it before I left the office. I got my phone open now. I need to carry on with it. I'm traveling, whatever. Like, I want to see the most recent stuff. And so I do like more of that emphasis there, that it's got some recommendations for me in a sort of a basic form, but they are there, and that it's also showing me the stuff that I'm working on the most. Which is usually what I want to access the most through a mobile device.
I think you're right. I think there's two experiences that really drive, that are just naturally the way that we work. one, to go back to reopen something and get right back into things that you were working on most recently. But then two is to simplify, like start searching. I mean, here's a complaint for as many documents that I work on throughout the day, and sometimes will go and reference, and I have to click 3 or 4 times to get to the place where I can even search for content on the desktop. And so making it much simpler, up front, and of course through the Delve experience, be able to find those things wherever they live. Honestly, it's simpler through the app and through that Delve experience than it is going through the native desktop application.
Great. All right, I think that's a great segue to talk about the Windows 10 Delve preview. So there's actually an app that you can download to your desktop, and it is in preview, so there's a lot of functionality that still isn't working there. It's not quite there yet, but I think it's a great opportunity to experience Delve in a different way, and to basically give the product teams some feedback as well as part of this, because I think it's good that they understand maybe the needs of what people are looking for. Maybe it's some of the stuff we just discussed in terms of, you care if stuff is in SharePoint, you don't care if it's in OneDrive, you just want to find it. And my experience is, I don't know, Mark and Christian, if you've been using this app, so I downloaded it the minute that we could have access to it, because I do love this stuff. And it's really just important from my perspective, just finding that stuff that I was working on recently. And so even though I can see this in the web browser, I found that when I'm on my Surface, it's actually much more helpful to have another application open with all that stuff. So I can actually check out, here's the stuff that I've been working on recently, and then I can perform a search from there. And I could do the same thing through the browser. But if you're like me and you have like 1 million tabs open all the time, like trying to find the tab where you have the portal.office.com open, using the Windows app has actually just been a more productive experience, because there's just a dedicated icon there on the taskbar, and I can just go there. And so finding like the recent activity here has been really great. So you can see your documents that are coming out, obviously from SharePoint and the different applications where you've been working. They do have they say that they're going to bring the attachment soon from email. So that will be extremely helpful just to be able to surface that up also in there. And then you can check out obviously these documents only. And there's a great way of being able to see your favorites. So wherever you stored a favorite, you're able to surface that up also into the Windows 10 app. And then, of course, search, which I won't show you because this is our live tenant, so I don't want to show you anything that's confidential in the company, but I just wanted to show you the experience at least. But you have basically that search bar at the top here where you can search for people, show you the people that I interact with the most at the top of inside of my company, and then it's showing me my recent documents as well. So it's just really trying to help you just get to that stuff wherever it is, right, inside of your Office 365 tenant. So, Christian, any thoughts?
Well, not having played with this yet, so I'm still also one of those Windows 8.1 users still. So I know, mock me now. Yeah. So what's funny is I'm actually updating Friday. I think Friday's the last day, isn't it, for the free upgrade now? Yeah. I'm waiting.
I'm annoyed by all the messages yet.
Oh yeah. So Friday afternoon and updating it. So yeah. I was just going to say that I am very excited by that attachments only feature when it's out. That is, that's a major frustrating thing to go digging through to find those attachments. So that's very cool.
Yeah. Very
so I haven't played with it either, even though I am on current technology, Christian. For me, the question is always, well, why do I want to install something new if I have something that I'm used to, or I'm, like, what's compelling? Is there anything about the Windows 10 version, which I think we would call a universal app? Is that right? It's same app that would run on the phone, right?
I think so. I think that's where it would come, but still very, very.
Yeah. But is there anything anything that's better, or that extra functionality that you get in this iteration of the app that you don't get through the browser because it's a bit of a richer client?
Yeah, not right now, other than you can see obviously a nice background. It's a nicer, glossier experience, I guess is the way to say it. I haven't seen a huge amount of different functionality because like the attachments part, for example, you can get it through the portal.office.com if you just go to delve through there. But like I said, the main advantage for me right now is having another taskbar thing.
Yeah.
In order to be able to do a search from there, keep that search result open, go off and work on the documents I need to, and then just see those search results are still there and I can interact with stuff. And it seems like a very silly thing, but I've actually found that to be very powerful for me. Instead of having to navigate back, 1 billion browser tabs ago when I had something open in there.
That's a huge thing. Yeah.
It is. It's a silly thing, but it's a huge thing for me. And I can imagine, from a sort of a search perspective, I think this will win. Now, I have no idea if there will be an integration with Cortana, for example, on your desktop. Maybe that's part of it too. I would love to be able to say, hey, Cortana, and go search Dell for me, right? And just bring me up those results automatically. So, all of those things are entirely possible when you have that client-side app to
right. What about the speed when you actually go and access any of these documents? Do you notice any big difference between it and the browser?
Yeah, so I found it to be very quick. It really is. So it's been much faster for me. So I'm trying to find something neutral to open since this is actually our real stuff. But if I open it, it is fast for me, and it doesn't. I don't get 1 billion logins, which is also obviously really important. Right?
Yeah. So does that actually you may have just hit on the most compelling reason right there. Does it actually get rid of the multiple login nightmare that we have to go through?
It's definitely better. I don't have all of my accounts set up, so different places that I save documents, so I don't have them all in my Office account. So, when you're in
right.
PowerPoint and whatever. So if I have one that isn't part of that, then I'm asked to log in again. But for the most part, it's really fast in returning back the results.
Does this help you at all with multiple tenants? I know that we're sort of oddballs in that we have thousands of these things.
That, so I have not tried through here. So you see how it's doing the sign in, because this is one that I don't have permission for, but it's much faster that way. If I have my PowerPoint, my Microsoft and Office accounts already set up inside of PowerPoint, then it works much better. So
right.
Cool. Anyway. Okay, so that's a great discussion there, so I appreciate that, guys, and hopefully that was at least enough to go have a taste of how this is working. So I'd encourage you, please go download the Delve Windows 10 app and give lots of feedback to the product team, because they're definitely listening, still very preview, still very early.
Do you want to show people where you give feedback in an app like this?
So you can do a couple of different things. They have a feedback function down here. So you can go right here to the little smiley face, and you can actually report things. Say you report a bug if you found something you don't like, etc. And that email goes straight off. So it makes it much easier to do that.
Does it reply and say that's good feedback? You think that would just be the default response,
It's all good.
One thing about feedback, if I can go off on a tangent for a second here, people need to write good feedback. I mean, the product group gets a lot of things like, you should change this.
Right.
But what does that mean? What's the use case? Why would you do it? How many times a day would that save you time? I think writing good feedback is actually a skill, and a lot of people feel like nobody ever listens to their feedback. Being somebody who gets a lot of feedback through various channels, I think people ought to think a lot more before they fill in a box like this. So, not just in this app, but if you're going to SharePoint User Voice or anything like that, you ought to really think about what you're putting in the box.
I was just going to comment and say that when you have make as many inaccurate statements as Mark does, you're going to get a lot of feedback.
Exactly, and corrections and exactly.
Legal statements, things like that.
As I go through my life being so wrong, I've learned a lot about how to accept feedback.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, you guys. Mentioning that, of course, that would be a great prompt, Mark, to talk about your SharePoint user voice request, which I noticed.
Which one?
Well, I was thinking specifically around the user-created modified dates, versus the computer modified dates.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I've been on a rampage, I guess would be the right word, on a couple of things. Yeah, we've all been used to, and this may segue into talking about some document library stuff, but we've all been very used to looking at site contents and seeing roughly when have each of the containers changed. When has this document library had a new document added? How long has it been since this list has been updated? It's a great sort of quick eyeball view of what's going on in this site. And sometime in the last, depending on who I talk to, since 2013 came out, or 2 or 3 months ago, I don't know where exactly, but those dates stopped meaning something, because especially on Office 365, they're being changed by system actions, which to me makes no sense whatsoever. Yes, maybe they built it that way on purpose, but what they did was they made those dates mean nothing. So I have a user voice suggestion out there that I've been getting people to vote for as much as I can to make those dates mean something again. And they're thinking about it. The cool thing is, if you go to user voice and you put something up, and luckily I can ask a lot of people to vote, if you get votes, they answer. They notice it very quickly. So, putting something up and having it have your three votes is not the way to solve problems. You need to get a lot of other people to say, yeah, I got this problem too.
But that's a great point just to make about, I say this just about every time I go and present somewhere about if people provide that feedback. Microsoft is listening. They are responding. But you need to go in there. You need to that and go leave that feedback. And then, especially it's quite easy if you're running into a problem, finding other people who will agree with you on that issue. But asking people to go in and respond, to your point, because Microsoft is listening and they will go in there and take action depending on the level of response that they receive.
It's interesting because I've posted about this on my blog, on Facebook, it's pretty much everywhere. I've been on a social media rampage with this. A lot of people say, yeah, you're right, but they don't go vote. Mm-hmm. So if you don't go vote, this stuff doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen. There have been some great suggestions that have been sitting out there in user voice and other places that the product group sees that just have been languishing. And Corey Roth had one out there since the beginning of June about getting the REST API to understand manage metadata fields. And I noticed it because somebody else said something. Now we've got the votes up. Now they're going to pay attention. So you really want to be participating in the community on this stuff, so that we can help speak to the product group about what really matters to us.
That's exactly right. So I do encourage people to go out to user voice. Sometimes they don't know it. So if you check out, it's like sharepoint.uservoice.com, or check out you can go to uservoice.com and just search for all of the different features and functionality that you might be interested in, and really do use those votes. You get a certain amount of votes per category. So you can say 3 votes or 2 votes or 1 vote for each of the suggestions. So do encourage people to go out there, because without it, the product team doesn't know it's important to you. And it's a good way to basically have some influence a little bit perhaps in the roadmap and fixing some of the things that are real world situations for us too. So I do think, Mark, this will be a great time to talk about the SharePoint document library, so the modern document libraries experience. And it's been out for a little while now. It keeps sort of coming out and pulling back and coming out and pulling back. But it's kind of an interesting one. So perhaps you can walk us through some of the changes that have happened there.
Yeah, it's been confusing because it sort of has come for me and then gone and then come back and gone. And site contents has been the same thing, but we won't talk about that so much. So the new document library experience, which is a word that has been ruined again, is basically what to me it is a nice new veneer on document libraries. They still do the same thing that they've always done, but what it's really made document libraries into are more like a single page application. You can do far more on that one page than you've been able to do in the past. So you can do things like preview documents right in the page. You can pin things to the top. You can edit metadata right there on that home page of the document library, and the robustness of each of these things has been improving in a steady march. It's actually been pretty impressive. They pushed this thing out there for everyone. They went to first release right before the May 4th event, and then not too long afterwards started pushing it out to every tenant. And we have an option to opt in or out, or control whether people opt in and out via admin settings, so it doesn't automatically just happen to everyone. But I think you'll find that especially end users are going to love it, because it's sort of dragged us out of the dark ages from an interface perspective. It's a modern, in the true sense of the word, modern web page that is more like what people are seeing on the consumer web. So I think that there is a lot of exciting stuff in there. I've seen a couple things from some tenants that I personally haven't seen that are coming. One is, for instance, an Open and Explorer link right in that modern page, because a lot of people don't want to lose that. I probably am not seeing it because I'm looking in Firefox now that I'm thinking about it. You still have to be in Internet Explorer for that. You have things like copy to. You can take a document and copy it to another folder or another place in the document library, which has always been just a pain in the neck. We've had to download stuff and then re-upload it. It's the kind of thing where people have been asking me for, I don't know, 10 years. Why doesn't SharePoint do this? And there's a lot of this in the new UI, which is pretty cool. What do you guys think of it? Naomi, I know that you love it because you love everything, but tell us why you love it.
I do love everything, I have to say. So it has been an interesting one. The biggest problem that I've had, honestly, has been the switching it on and switching it off problem.
Yeah, it's hard as hell to make it happen.
And there seems to be somewhat haphazard. So even though our tenant by default is in first release for all users, so we got it and I was like, oh, surprise. And then it keeps coming and going, and I don't know why from that perspective.
Well, under the covers, there's a persistent cookie that actually remembers your choice. Mm-hmm. So unfortunately, that cookie doesn't go away if you make a change. So they've got to work something out there, because just changing going into the advanced settings in the list in the library and changing your setting doesn't actually change that cookie, and I don't understand why. That doesn't really make any sense to me. So that's part of your problem. But yes, the functionality is actually sort of come and gone a few times along the way too.
Right, and that's been interesting. So just working with some folks in the office here has been a problem, because I've had people who are like, well, it was like this yesterday and it was like this yesterday. And so sometimes when I'm dealing with more senior folks in our company, let's put it that way, which I oftentimes have a problem with just SharePoint adoption of like, yeah, can you put the thing in the right place?
Was that a dig on senior folks? Wait a minute. Is that an age thing?
No, it wasn't. It was a more senior leadership in our company.
Okay.
A part of, I'm trying to get them to put the documents into the right place, right, and just do it directly themselves. And actually having the switch of experience is really weird. So especially because they always like playing the kind of the list view before. And so if you're like that and you like that kind of view, so then, okay, now we've got, images and stuff. I don't really understand what's going on. So. But I do think basically having a single web app for it, right, a one-page app basically, is fantastic. So I am definitely excited about that part. And I do want SharePoint to not look like SharePoint, right? And I think that is one step towards basically going there and seeing those images. And
it won't be that long before that is the way SharePoint looks. So we'll want the next thing, right?
We'll want the next catchphrase, I know.
Yeah.
It's the images that we're seeing, and same thing in terms of document libraries, obviously in OneDrive for Business, right? Seeing those previews, images, all that kind of stuff. All of this makes it a richer, nicer user interface basically for us.
Yeah. Christian, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, so a couple things that I really like about it. One, that it is gives you more action right there from the primary screen around an individual document, an artifact. So being able to see the metadata associated with it and add to that, or right-click and take action on it would be the other thing. It's pretty powerful, but it's and I've written a lot about this, and we've talked about this before, but what I like about it overall, and I kind of in the fanboy aspect of it, is that it is working with the. Got a train going by there, Mark?
It's just traffic. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, no worries. But it's more consistent with the other consumer-based tools that people are used to. So I think it's I've liked using the OneDrive and OneDrive for Business, and I found myself using those tools, the consumer version and the SharePoint version, more and more already. And so now that this is becoming consistent with that experience, I see that I'm able to use it and be able to move files in between them. It's going to be very cool, but as well. But again, it's like I said earlier. It's now I'm having to go back and look at the way that I'm doing certain activities to make sure that I'm doing them in the place where I can take advantage of all the new features, such as the mobile app.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. And then I see in the chat room there we had a comment in terms of looking at the preview options. So in the classic view, when they mouse over, they were seeing the preview. So, it's a change of pace, I guess, from that perspective. You should be seeing a preview in that already. So I'm not sure if that's a tenant thing or whether it's just because of the rollout or what's going on there. I don't know, Mark, if you have any experience on that. So unmute.
Unfortunately, when they roll this stuff out, it does sort of go in waves. And sometimes I think with this one, the waves are small and there are many of them, as opposed to sort of a big one where everyone gets the same thing at the same time. So there are some hiccups, and especially since they're rolling out changes all the time too, it's very easy to go for us from one tenant to another and say, wait a minute, why is it doing this? So that can be disconcerting. There's still some things that are not there or are a concern to people. For instance, theming is not applied the same way to the document, the new document library experience as it is to other pages yet. From a development standpoint, custom actions don't work the same way. So some of the third-party vendor tools that you might have may not work correctly. That's why you have that option to go back. So my recommendation has been to the clients I've talked to about this is if it doesn't work for you in some way, don't use it. Just wait, and it'll become more and more stable and more robust, because this is the new thing. And they realized out in Redmond that they have to earn the right to turn off anything old. And this is new for them, right? They've actually talked about this publicly. They have to make sure that these new experiences are as good as, or actually really have to be better before they earn the right to turn them off in favor of forcing everyone there. So we'll see how this goes, because this is one of the first big things that's gone everywhere that is replacing an existing UI.
I think to that point, Joe, that that when the blog post came out and there were some people that were ruffled by, I can't remember the verbiage on it, that it would the classic view would be supported
through 2017.
Right. People were like, wait a second, so it could, because that could change, or what do you really mean? And like Chris McNulty, like scrambled to correct that, no, that's not how you're interpreting. People love in SharePoint to read between the lines, to look at what was not said, about the future of tools and features. And so I think that's part of the learning for Microsoft, especially around something new like this, is how to message it. And I think people are very quick.
Well, I think we've had a long history where we would hear something like that. We would have to extrapolate because we couldn't get a straight answer out of anyone. And we would feel like we were going to get, shafted. There's a polite word, shafted in some way. I think that that's changed tremendously. I think that, that they really have had these conversations about earning the right to turn off an old thing. I mean, they're not trying to screw anyone over. That's not their intent. They're trying to make things better, but they have to make them better than today in order to earn the right to have us all sort of go along for that ride. When they first put this out there, and some of the, like the top, the other thing that's not consistent is the managed navigation. You just don't get that in the new document library. They know they have to fix that before anyone's going to go whole hog for it in a large installation. So, it'll all come.
I think that is the burden of continuous improvement, is that it's not just software side, right? It's the users have to really perceive that improvement part of it. And it is, as you mentioned, it's earning the right. So it's a good way to sort of think about that in terms of we have to show that there's absolute beneficial use, not just we changed the UI because it looked prettier kind of thing.
And better communication than we have something new, because that in itself is not compelling. Just because it's new, Naomi, you will go download it, you will go try it, and you will get very excited about it. But the rest of the marketplace is made up of laggards and skeptics and all kinds of other people in the adopter curve, and they have to speak to all of those people. So they're learning that communication, and I think that they're learning it very quickly. They brought in some people who we know quite well, who are very good listeners and communicators, and we're all encouraged by that.
Absolutely. Definitely some great hires at Microsoft in the office recently. But and I do think it's interesting that the value story, right? It's very hard, I think, from a software vendor perspective in terms of you have the tendency to push out a new feature, a new function, because it's like, oh yeah, we get excited about that. And instead having to lead with that, here's the value to you as the user, right? It can be difficult to do that. So, great, we have a new experience. Well, who cares until they can see what that appreciable difference is for them. All right, so I think this would be a great time to talk about the Office 365 groups. There have been some updates, specifically on the administration side. So there's been a good traction on groups, I think, and we've seen some improvements on administration. Now, one of the biggest pushbacks, and you guys tell me if you've heard this too, I've had a lot of people come up to me after conferences and on my blog, etc., saying the biggest problem we've had with Office 365 groups is the lack of governance. And part of me is like, because we want people to collaborate. We want them to have these productive experiences. And if the baseline is the way you're doing collaboration right now is through email, of which there isn't a whole lot of governance, just going to say that. So if the baseline is that versus I use Office 365 with a governance story that's getting much, much stronger. But the recent updates we had, I think last month now, have been really around the group's administration. And so there's been a lot of new stuff as part of that. And just some of the highlights for me have been things like the ability to have a policy around group creation, right? So administrators can set up ahead of time the kinds of groups or the people specifically that are allowed to create groups. So if that's a big issue for you inside your organization, you can do that now. The other aspect of it is administrators can also control the privacy on groups. And you can actually switch it, public to private and private to public. Previously, you were not able to go backwards and forwards, basically, between the two different privacy settings. And there's actually a commandlet to do that too. So if you want to do this en masse or just do it in a repeatable, good manner through PowerShell, you're able to do that now too. So there's a couple of the highlights from my perspective. There's been a lot more in terms of what's on the roadmap. Because the sort of the integration into Delve and Office Graph as well. So one of the things that was highlighted was really looking at the Office Graph integration with private files in your groups. So they're working on that. I'm sure we'll see that very shortly, probably in the next couple of months or so, in terms of just being able to see the group files that you have from private groups and have that surface up into your Delve personalized search, basically. And so that will be a great sort of admission as part of that to have all that content available to you. So I don't know if you guys have seen any of the other highlights in terms of groups and administration and some of the feedback you might have heard.
Well, watching Christian's lips. I think you're right. The governance thing has definitely been the big sticking point. This is one of those places, though, where I think Microsoft has been way ahead of the market. The way we work has changed, and it will continue to change, and the world never stands still. So the fact that people can spin up groups to just do some work together is actually a great thing. It's sort of what we've been trying to get people to think about for 20 years or more. So I think even if you go back 5 years, the concept of even sticking your stuff in the cloud was like, no, that'll never happen. So the marketplace, the workplace is changing so quickly that I think that they probably drag their feet a little bit about some of these administrative things because they want to enable work groups to come up and just do stuff, and move things from email into a more protected area that can be locked down and stuff. So I think it's great to see some of these administrative tools there. For some organizations, groups were going to go nowhere without them. But I think the power of the group's concept is, the three of us are going to work on something. Oh, we have a group. Bang, we're up and running. There's no discussion. So keeping that more open is actually a better thing for a lot of organizations that think they ought to lock it down. Mm-hmm. Those organizations will be behind for a while until they realize that that's a good thing.
Yeah. And then I think one of the great things is also that you can do your Exchange basically hybrid kind of approach. So if you're still running your Exchange on-prem, you can still have your Office 365 in the cloud, and those two things will actually talk to each other now, which is pretty amazing. And then, there's some other sort of aspects of that in terms of group naming conventions. I know that's coming down the line too. And group classification policies too. So administrators from that governance perspective will be able to say, certain naming conventions, prefixes or suffixes, or even the ability to say, this group is, corporate confidential. So all the files, everything in there are basically, top secret or the corp com or, whatever the particular classification is that you use inside of your company. So I think that's also very powerful from just if you really want to have kind of tight governance and you're concerned about how things are being shared inside of the organization, then I think those kind of, that being able to have that kind of framework, if that's suitable for you, will work very, very well. So, Christian?
I think that there's, we keep throwing the word governance around too, and there's really two sides. I think there's actually a lot of strength on the back end side of that. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, we have, years and years and years of development advances around the governance of content that's certainly in Exchange and in SharePoint and in those places. And you're talking about more of more of the provisioning and the user management and the feature usage and the governance of usage of the technology that way. Mm-hmm. And I think that the issue that's still out there, and there's not a polished answer for it yet, is still which tool to use when and what fits in your organization. And it just kind of comes down to, because my org, we don't use groups at all. So we use our social tools, and then it's all based in SharePoint. And so it just is not a match for the way that our organization works. But I go in, I monitor that stuff. It's turned on. We're not worried about who's provisioning and using. We don't have those kinds of controls, and we're also very small compared to a lot of those customer organizations. But that's just a discussion you have to have inside of your organization of if people are using these, how they're using them. And I've said this for years. I mean, the more controls you put on a system, the more lockdown that you make it, the more hoops that you have people jump through to use that capability and be productive, then the more likely they are to go around you and go find the things that they want. And so that's just something you need to be careful of and be aware of, what the system can do and can't do, and don't just run out there and shut it down if that is going to make a difference in getting people more productive and get them to adopt and engage inside the platform. So I'm very pro on having the various tools and solutions that are out there, but you need to do it with your eyes open, be aware of what they do and the differences and what's the best fit for your culture and organization.
Mm-hmm.
Totally agree with all that. One other thing that we should probably mention is that groups and team sites are actually getting closer together. When groups were first announced, they were sort of off in the distance somewhere. It didn't really make sense. And you mentioned, Christian, when do I use what? I wish Microsoft would sort of come out with a decision tree when they do this stuff, at least how they think about it. It's not, your organization is different than mine, which is different than Naomi's. And we're just three people. But the fact that the groups and team sites are going to move a little closer together, I think, is going to help make that decision-making process a little easier. If you start a group and you really needed a team site, it's not going to be impossible to go that way, and vice versa. So you're going to start to see some more commonality across those two concepts, so that it's not prohibitive to, you don't have to rip up stakes and move to another state in order to work in a different way. It's going to be an easier transition.
Yeah, I know I'm always excited about it, but I do think Office 365 Groups is going to be amazing. I really do think as a construct, right, just of how things are going to work, instead of looking at the specific workloads that we've concentrated on, if it's going to be SharePoint, something's going to be in OneDrive, wherever. I think this very core idea of I have a group of users, right? I have the calendar, I have the conversations, I have the files, and I have the notebook that is associated with that group of users for the longevity of a team, right? Whatever it is you're working with. And then you have basically applications like Planner, you'll have other stuff, right? You could be using Microsoft Flow, you could be using a Microsoft Power App, right? Things to be able to interact and make that team even more productive. And so for me, that vision of how things are going to work, it takes away a lot of the issue in terms of, the what tool when thing. I think giving choice to users is really important. I think you have to give them guidance, but I think you can't be wholly prescriptive in it. I think it's much more important from that perspective to have as part of your project management methodology, as part of your team management kind of policies that you might have, individual tenants inside of an organization. By tenants, I mean things, values inside of that organization, not tenants like Office 365. And to connect those things specifically with when you create a new team, when you're on a new project, when you're deploying something new, whatever it is that you're doing inside of your company, you're going to create this group, or you're going to create, whatever structure you need to actually have as part of that. I think if we don't connect the process behaviors that we have inside of the organization to here's how we're going to collaborate and keep the information and do the records retention and all the other stuff that we have to do, then it's very, very hard for users. If you sort of divorce here's the business use case away from here's the specific technologies, and instead try to make it more of a behavior inside of the company. Oh, we're having a new team. We're going to get together. We're going to create a group, right? And just make it part of that way. And I think that removes a lot of the problems in terms of choice for people and kind of elevates the discussion away from should it be in SharePoint, should it be in OneDrive. We don't care, right? I'm a team. I'm a group of people. We're working together. We got our calendar. We got our conversations. We got our documents. We got our notebook. We got our planner, right? That's all you really care about.
I've started talking to my clients and saying, you need to actually put some words on these pages. Explain how you feel about this stuff. Not the governance document that goes in the filing cabinet in the basement and has an armed guard. It's, what should I think about? When I want to go and do some work somehow, what do I do? Who do I talk to? Where do I get advice? Where do I sort of think about what kind of work I'm doing and which tool is going to be the right one? That's not a technology thing. That's understanding about what shape your work is in. And, even just thinking that through changes the way you do your work, and that's usually a positive thing. Sorry, Christian, I interrupted you.
No, it's all right. I was just going to say, agreeing with Naomi on that, at the end of the day, it's you want to give people the tools they need to be productive, but you need to, as an organization and the owner of the platform of the tools, working with your end users, I think you need to be very open to have that dialogue about what's happening on the back end and why sometimes certain features might be disabled or, certain decisions made from a corporate governance standpoint of, hey, look, if we don't capture it in this way and document it this way with metadata managed this way, we could get sued, or we need to be able to have that level of transparency about the way that the tools are and they're being used. And I think people are usually mature enough to understand that, and that will then help shape the way they may use the tools. And they may not then go around you to go use some web-based third-party tool that is really duplicating what's already in the system.
Yeah, the IT culture of no means Box, Dropbox, Asana, all those things are going to be used like crazy in your organization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it's important too on groups. One of the learnings that they've had probably from the Yammer acquisition is the ability to have a usage policy, right? And I've used usage policies inside of lots of customer deployments in terms of being able to transmit very succinctly how to use whatever it is, whatever construct I'm putting through here. And one of the reasons to do that is to be very clear in your users and sort of, this is what this group is for, right? These are the things we want to talk about, but if you have something that's top secret, don't put it in here, right? Or put it in some other group, just to be able to put those things there. And I think making that whole, the security, the compliance part of it is definitely integrating in, obviously, more from that perspective in terms of, administrators will be able to set, specific classifications for those groups. So if all the information in that group is company confidential, it will be company confidential, right? But it makes it easier from that perspective of, like, if that user then tries to share that file with somebody externally, you can integrate that in with your DLP, right? To be able to say, when something is company confidential, do not allow it to be, forwarded to external parties, right? And I think part of that story is, like, instead of relying on the user to have all of this knowledge of when's this and when is that and what tool and whatever, we want to elevate that discussion. We want to elevate the discussion to, here's the process, like, these are the steps you do on a regular basis during your workday or as part of team collaboration, and here's the behaviors. And here's this handy-dandy usage guide, right, to tell you, like, don't put anything in here that's top secret, right? And I do stress for people, if you can, in your usage policies, use graphics in there, right? A lot of times we put a whole bunch of words and it's like, I don't really read that, right? You can click next, whatever. And you can do this even with Yammer and anything else. You can put graphics in there, and graphics much faster, right? It's easy to read, like, don't put this, don't do this, do this, right? It's much faster for folks.
Well, this community has an image of a firing squad. I should probably not put anything in that one.
Exactly.
Nobody cares about those words anywhere near as much as the people who write them, right?
I know. That's why images are important, like, because even if you just look at it very briefly, like, oh, you hit, the result of it at least hits you, and you're like, okay, yeah, I can understand I'm not supposed to do it, right? We need those quick references. And then obviously you can back it up then with technologies like LP type of story too. So I've been very excited as usual from a group's perspective, but I do think going forward, like, elevating the discussion away from the tool thing to, here's a group of people, how do I give them the stuff they need, the functionality they need, regardless of whether it's being served out of OneDrive or out of OneNote or out of Exchange, right? I don't care about where the tool is coming from. I want that functionality because I need to do these things to get my teamwork done. So I think we're sort of seeing the beginnings of that and basically getting rid of some of those artificial boundaries between applications and platforms that we had before. So I think it would be great to move our conversation on to the Worldwide Partner Conference. So if you were able to check out the Worldwide Partner Conference, there was a great keynote led by Satya Nadella on the first day, and you can watch the replay of that on there. So you can go to digital.wpc.com and you can check out the keynote, and then the second day's keynote was lots of demos and lots of other cool things. So there were some great highlights there. Maybe Christian, do you want to talk about some of the highlights for you, and then I can do the same? And
well, probably the wrong person to ask. My highlights were that we had a major product release, and so I did a big Beezy announcement. So, there were some interesting things that, having conversations with folks over at the Social Squad area down the expo floor. There was a lot around kind of the Internet of Things and some really cool. I think just looking at the maturity of the technology, and certainly with Satya at the helm the last couple of years. This idea that the Internet of Things and the connectivity of all of our devices and all the collaboration technology all coming together, and on the stage with Jeffrey Immelt from GE talking about how they're using it to connect all of the services. When you think about manufacturing technology players. And if you're not familiar with the space, I actually have a background in that category, high-tech and manufacturing technology players, where they have their, all of these different suppliers. If you think of like the development, the creation of like a mobile phone, a device, and all of the various tiers of suppliers that are there, being able to share information in real time and collaborate as they need when a spec is changed or when a supplier has failed to deliver on time, and how they're going to deal with that, or of course the design changes and how that impacts the end user, the delivery of the completed manufactured product to the shelves. I mean, it's really amazing that, you know, they have that level of demand planning and intelligence now around the devices to know how a delay in the shipment of raw materials will impact the delivery and the timing of a truck showing up to your Best Buy and delivering that. It's just incredible. And so there was a lot of talk around kind of that side of things, and that's what stood out to me about day one, certainly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought it was for me, the big highlight for day one, obviously Jeffrey Immelt being on stage there. So I'm like, just thinking about what this really means from a partnering perspective, or where, you know, Microsoft's directions really are. Day one's keynote was all about the business customer, right? And so it was really pushing partners to be away from moving from IT as your only customer inside of an organization to here's you know, interacting directly with business managers and business leaders. So I felt just having the CEO of GE on the stage was kind of amazing, right? Because I would never have expected that at a Microsoft partner conference, right? Just traditionally very technology, and, you know, you talk to CIOs and stuff, and here we have the CEO of an enormous company. And it was also stressing that message that Satya gave us a couple of years ago now, in terms of every company is a software company, right? So whatever it is you do, whatever it is your organization produces, whether it's products, services, or a combination of both, all of those things are powered by software. And so the differentiation, the competitive advantage and stuff you were talking about, Christian, in terms of understanding your supply chain, understanding the consequences of supply chain, being able to predict supply chain and logistics, all of those things really come down to having competitive edge from information. And that all comes from technology. So when you're using these solutions, you're building this stuff inside your organization. It's a core part of your business, but the software that powers that becomes part of your differentiation, becomes that tool that enables that competitive advantage. Yeah. So for me, I was quite astounded to see like this so much business focus there. Yeah. And then I think the second day,
seeing as a trend anyway with like SharePoint Saturdays. I mean, if you look at any events around the world around just, you know, SharePoint Office 365, it has been trending the last 2, 3, 4 years towards more of the business users, because, I mean, that's the evolution that's been happening in everyone's company, is a lot of those decisions and ownership have been driven down to the business to say, it's not just about deploying the technology, we need to get value, business value out of these tools. And so
and you're saying this is new?
No, well, in the SharePoint space, but yeah.
It sadly has not been enough of a focus, right? And from what I saw of WPC, not having been there, you know, you guys were getting to hear a lot of the what's the point kind of discussion, which is actually the real point, right?
Yeah, and I was just astounded to see so much business focus. I really was. So from a partner conference, I've been to WPC for many years now, and just really highlighting that strong differentiation there. I will say on the SharePoint part, of course, we did have a sneak peek. You can check out Bill Baer had a session, Darren Kogan had a session on seeing the app parts coming into SharePoint 2016, which is pretty cool, right? So you could see that new stuff that was there too. So there was some total features and functionality. One of the strong things that also stuck out for me was the highlighting of ISVs. So if you're a software company, Microsoft was definitely pushing high in terms of, you know, it's not just about system integrator partners as much as it is also about encouraging a whole ecosystem of software companies that are basically building value on top of those products. So again, that was different for me in terms of people are looking for solutions. They're looking for off-the-shelf solutions instead of having to custom build something so much, and then really fitting it with their industry vertical or their specific problem. So again, that was really brought home. One of the great examples I thought they shared was the EcoLab story. So being able to show the remote disbursement of water use and being able to monitor that. So the whole IoT story, the whole predictive analytics story was all part of that. But just having that as a solution and packaging that up. And one of the reasons that GE was even on stage, right, was that Microsoft and GE were announcing a partnership so that you can actually use some of GE's, what was previously their intellectual property, and you can actually now run that yourselves on Azure. So just looking at that platform is a great way to do some analytic processing too. So all kinds of really cool things in terms of here's software, here's a differentiation, here's not just a horizontal technology, but specifically how it can go in and fix a customer problem. So I thought it was amazing to see all that stuff highlighted, and do encourage, if you weren't there, go watch the keynotes, and there's a whole bunch of other content out there too. So I know we're over time, so I'm sure Lyman's going to pull the hook on me soon. But thank you so much, Mark and Christian. Any parting thoughts before we wrap it up?
I'm good. Thanks a lot for everybody for participating.
Yeah, thanks Naomi, for leading us through this one, and we'll see you again next month, I guess.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you so much for participating.
Thank you, Lyman.
Yeah, thank you so much for participating today. That's great. Just want to let the attendees know that this has been recorded and will be posted on the IT Unity website by later today. So if you want to check out any of the past presentations over the last year and a half, please go to http://itunity.com/collabtalk, and you'll have all past episodes there recorded, as well as information about upcoming CollabTalk presentations. I hope you have a great day. Enjoy your summer, everyone, and we will all see you at the next CollabTalk. Take care.